Hello, my name is Lea McComas, and I'm here at the Houston Quilt Festival with my quilt Bike Boys. And it has just won the Superior Threads Master Award for Thread Artistry, so it's really a thrill for me. And I want to tell you the story about this quilt. I started with a photo, a historical photo that I got from the archives of the History Colorado Center, which is the history museum in Denver. And in the archives I found this photo. They also gave me a copy of newspaper advertisement from the Denver Post, and it's 1896. So this bike was built by the Fowler Bike Company in Chicago in that time period and sent to Denver for their very first bike symposium. And this crew raced against another crew. I think it was a bike built for 4 in a 1-mile race. I don't know the name of the other bike, and I don't know who won the race. I was never able to find that in my research. So I put this photo in Photoshop. I grayscale it if it isn't already grayscaled when I work with photos, and then I posterize it so that there's 5 values in the faces. I like to work with that. I print it on paper at the size that I want, so this is pretty big. I do it. You can do it at a blueprint shop. They'll do it for you. And then I put freezer paper over the top, and I draw a pattern, and I mark the values. 1 is the lightest, 5 is the darkest. I also, because this one is so complicated, I took different colored highlighters and I drew around the figures so I could keep them straight, because every single figure, every element of this quilt is done with a different set of fabrics and thread. And what I do is I create a fabric foundation that's fused applique, and then when that's all done, I stitch over it. So 5 fabrics for every figure, and then 5 to 9 threads. And I try to blend it so you can't tell where the individual pieces of fabric were. The process I use also lets me make a lot of design decisions. For example, the back of it is done in very cool grays, and that's to push it backwards. But the Bike Boys are done in browns, and so they're warm tones and they come forward. And because they're each done in a different set of brown tones, then there's contrast between them, which also makes it a little more lively. Even the reds, the bike, you notice, is kind of an orangey red, but if you look in the background, this guy's vest is red, but it's very much a red violet. It's got a little bit of purple in it, which helps to push it back. And in my process too, I eliminate some things. There were extra people standing back here, and I got rid of them because I thought they were too distracting. When I got the fabric foundation done, I had this really dark black hole right here. So I added this guy back in. He originally was next to this man, and I thought he was distracting. So when I put him back in, I created him in really dark threads, medium to dark grays, and that pushes him back into the shadow, which helped give it this 3-dimensional look. So that's where he's at. When I finished with this, I used 91 different fabrics and 144 different threads. And my original intent was to just make this 6 by 3 foot panel, but when I was done, so that's, by the way, that's 18 square feet of solid thread painting. But when I was done, it was like, oh, it's not right, which is a panicky feeling when you've done all that. So I created this second panel for it to sit on top of, and the shadow is made with black tulle, and then I quilted it. Now, it was getting pretty heavy, so I laid this panel on fabric. I drew a chalk line around it so I knew which parts would show. I put it on my long arm and I did all the stitching. Then I cut a hole in the middle, and I stitched about 4 inches past the chalk line. Then I cut a hole out of it and I finished that edge. This first panel went on top, and I stitched in the ditch around here to connect it, and then on the back I had to hand stitch, you know, the edge of this panel onto this one so you could see. And it did 2 things. It eliminated some extra weight, and then it also exposed the back of this, because when you submit to a competition, if you've got your back covered, the judges just assume you're covering up something bad, and they don't like that. So I had to cut that out and expose it. So it worked out pretty well. I'm trying to think of what else I might tell you. I love to work from historical photos. I think there's some connection with our past, and I often say that the present is just history wearing new clothes. And so it's important to connect with it and know things. And many of these characters remind me of people in my own life. For example, this guy in front, I call him Willis. My dad was Willis, or is Willis, and he used to be an avid cyclist. He also uses these really corny sayings, you know, to teach life lessons, and one of them is, if you're not the lead dog, the scenery never changes. So that's why I call this guy in front Willis. And another character that I know is this guy in the back. I call him Tim. Sometime back I dated a guy named Tim, and he introduced me to fine cigars and single malt scotch. I've since given up the cigars, but this guy in the back is smoking a cigar while he's riding the bike, and I just thought that was hilarious. I mean, it's funny enough, these guys are all wearing three-piece suits while they're cycling around Denver, but he's actually wearing or smoking a cigar. And I picture him as kind of that character that's on the back and is maybe goofing around, and the people in front of him have no idea what he's doing, but he's tipping his hat to the ladies and, you know, just interacting with the crowd. That's how I imagine him. That's his story. So anyway, I hope that if you ever see me, come and talk to me and tell me if you recognize somebody on the bike, you know, that you relate to, and tell me what that story is and how you relate to them. Thanks.